Today I'm going to be joined by Nigel Paine. I'll introduce him in a moment, but feel free in the chat and Q&A, both chat and Q&A can be used. My colleagues Anna Lloyd and Rob Carter will also be answering your questions. So Nigel and others will be throwing out the questions at me if I don't see them, but in real time, you will get responses. And as Nigel and I chatted about this, we will make sure we get back to all of you with your questions. If not during the session, we will definitely follow up and make sure that you get your answers. With that being said, there I am, introduction here. Very excited to be a part of this. For many, many years in my previous roles, I've had to speak about mandated Click Next training and its ineffectiveness. The great thing is we're now here talking about self-directed learning and really how that is the direction to head into. My guest speaker here, and I'm super excited to have Nigel Paine. Nigel, why don't you share with us not only your own introduction, but the meaning of this picture, because it's one of my favorite that I've seen on your site.
Well, I think people waited far too long for a really glamorous photo, but they've got it now. This is actually me in Antarctica. I was on an expedition there and I did the leadership stuff. Other people did the how to survive on ice and all the other exciting adventures that we had. But the point about the trip was to really build people's personal leadership insight. And it's amazing when you're completely dislocated and disconnected, as you are in Antarctica, real insight and ideas flow. So those three people on the screen below me, each really changed their lives on that voyage. They came away and did some amazing work, particularly around sustainability and around building new learning programs. And for the Indian couple, they spent time building a school in the mountains to help illiterate Indian kids not just learn literacy, but learn computer literacy so they could get jobs in the emerging economy. And the woman on the left is a consultant dentist, and she built a whole sustainability program for the whole of the NHS that came out of the discussions that we had on the trip. So it was an amazing, amazing occasion for me and very important.
Cool. Well, today we're going to start off by just acknowledging that most folks, when it comes to hiring by 2021, they're not loading up the L&D departments. Many of the L&D folks are stating that they are being asked to do more with less. Now, I'm going to ask for a lot of engagement as much as I can from you all. So I'm going to ask you all in the chat box, write if that seems to be your situation. That you're being asked to do more with less. And even in the situation that we're in right now with the pandemic, is that something that's hitting you? Now, in capital letters, if you are actually getting more budget and you're getting more hires, can you write that in too? Statistically, we're hearing that 4 out of 5 expect 10% growth in revenue. However, we're discovering that the L&D departments, this is a McKinsey report, are not being given that extra money to our extra employees to actually use with that 10% growth. Nigel, can you speak to this at all?
Well, if you look at the McKinsey report, that unlike many reports, this is based on a very large quantum of organizations around the world. So that I think the data is valid. It's not just 5 organizations that I bumped into last Friday. So this is a trend that they're putting their finger on. And in the current climate, I think this is getting worse, not better. This is pre-COVID data, but it's now very strongly represented amongst certainly the L&D community that I'm part of.
And you lead us right into the next slide, which pre-COVID, this was the slide. What skills will we need in this future? Really important, but based on what's happened for the last month, which is incredibly serious, and we're all equally impacted, and it's a global issue, we need to cross out future and say today. What skills do we need today? And I think that's really critically important, that the future all of a sudden came to us. This was something designed to talk about in a year or two, but we're all being put in a different situation. Our norms are different. And before we even look at this graph, once again, I'm going to ask you, please go to the chat box, and I'm going to give you 10 seconds or so, or 30 seconds. What skill do you think you need for today? Please put that in, because I think that's That's really, really important, because if you don't know what you're shooting for skill-wise, how can we upskill? So take a second. Agility, I'm seeing here, this is great. Collaboration, resilience, really great. And I mean, I can't echo the speakers that we've just heard. Melissa Schilling just was earlier, and many of the others, how important this is. Well, of course, what we would have probably stated if we weren't all experiencing it for the past 3 to 5 weeks. I think what we mostly would have seen, and this is through the McKinsey report as well, advanced data analytics. I want to speak for a quick second about that, and stating I did about 6 months of research in regard to learning data analytics, and they had all this really cool mantra out there that the sexiest job for the 21st century is the data scientist. Most people were going through digital transformations within their organization. Data, data, data. It was all about who had that special skill. When the results of this report came in, as you can see on this slide, most of the far right top area, that which is growing and incredibly important, not data skills. In my research, and I'm going to let, I mean, Nigel's done quite a bit of work on this as well. In my research, what I read was leverage, if you can, off the sales group, the ops group, the marketing group for their data scientists. Most likely in 3 to 4 years, much of what they're doing will be automated and enabled by technology, but what won't be are these cognitive, or what we once called soft skills, to the far right. And Nigel, I know you've done a ton of this with your leadership work. Why don't you speak to that top right quadrant right there?
I call these skills generative skills as opposed to operational skills. And generative skills are the skills you need to be able to acquire other skills. And if you look at those, they are not what you would have typically thought of as being the skills of the future. And it's very important that we recognize that critical thinking, Dave DiFilippo came up with, as emotional intelligence, creativity, diversity, empathy, versatility. They're all in the chat box. All of those are the critical skills, because they enable people to deal with complexity, to work when there's no direction or direct answer to problems, and they allow people to acquire, give them the confidence and the belief to acquire other skills. So the growth mindset is embedded in all of those top right-hand corner skills, and they're extremely important. And I would argue getting more important by the day.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we're going to even further discuss this in this concept of top-down management and bottom-up. And really, as Nigel and I were prepping for this, this couldn't be any more important than it is today. However, back in the day, I was certified in a program called Leadership 2000. So you can imagine what year that was and how long ago. But the big discussion in regard to that program was the tell-get leadership is that very managed and not as evolved as maybe a listen-serve leadership style. Well, that too fits into this way that we manage our learners. And Nigel, we shared a great conversation on this, and I'm going to let you share it too. But in today's environment, today, you are dealing with a lot of employees and L&D folks needing to be self-managed. Nigel, tell us a little bit more of what that means to you and what it means in general to the industry.
Well, if you look at the kinds of organizations today that are trying to manage large numbers of their staff working from home, the successful ones are those that basically trust their employees, recognize the kinds of problems that they're facing, have some empathy and sympathy and support, and let people do what they need to do in their own time. Because if you've got 2 screaming children on your lap, it's very difficult to have a profound thought. But maybe 2 hours later, you've got some moments to yourself. The worst performing companies are those where top-down management, I want to know you're online, and I've heard it. Companies are demanding that they can see people logged on between 9 and 5. They want to be briefed about what they've achieved every morning and every afternoon, and basically can't relinquish control. So that's the top-down management. So in this climate, top-down is actually destroying value. Bottom-up is at least creating a platform where value can be created. Right. So this is not just nice to have, maybe, maybe not. This is really, really significant. And it's starkly played out every single day. And a lot of people, I think, on the call will recognize that.
Yeah, and I think we're physically feeling it. It was mentioned in the sessions earlier, but if it's not little children behind me, 2 doors to the college-age daughters. So I'm in constant fear that at some point they're going to be jumping out and not really thinking that I'm on a call like this. We are now feeling what it's like to have to be self-managed, and the difference it feels if your culture is what Nigel was pointing out. It doesn't have a trust factor to it. And then Nigel, we're leading into one of your favorite quotes here. Why don't you take this one too?
Well, John Dewey, you know, he wasn't writing in 2009. He was writing in the 1930s, and I think he's got a very profound point that if we substitute students for employees, if we create or we develop employees the way we taught yesterday's employees, we rob them of probably of a job before anything else, but we certainly rob them of career development and a future. So I think, you know, we didn't listen to Dewey then, and we probably should listen to him a little bit more now. And if you go to the next slide, Karen, I think there's a really interesting range of learning skills that we can employ in the workplace. Now, there are technical terms: pedagogy, andragogy, hoitagogy. Don't worry about those. And don't think that pedagogy is for kids, andragogy is for adults, and hoitagogy is for goodness knows who. Look at the models of learning. And what it's saying is that there are 3 completely different models of learning. Pedagogy, unidirectional transfer, the sage on the stage, the teacher at the front, telling people what they need to learn. The middle one is self-directed learning, where the teacher acts as a facilitator, the guide on the side, multi-directional transfer, students learning from each other. But what's really interesting is the 3rd column, where it's about agile, learner-centric learning, where the learner can be teacher and the teacher can be learner. So if you imagine that middle box, where each of those people is either a teacher or a learner and can step into the center to be the teacher, step out to be a learner, can teach the person next to them and the person across the room or the person across the company, you start to get a feel for a more profound kind of learning. And what I would argue is that in the current climate, where it's not about being told what to do, it's about trying to work out what the problem is before you can even begin to solve it. So that 3rd model is really important, and you won't ever get a great learning culture, and you won't get learners taking responsibility for their own learning unless you build that kind of self-determined learning model as part of your suite of learning. So I think there are times when teacher-led is okay. I'm not saying that's bad. And also facilitated is really useful. But there are times when you have to trust your learner, put your learner in charge and say, you are both learner and teacher, and we are both learners and teachers through the organization. That's the kind of heart of a learning culture, essentially.
Right. And I want to end this with the most important part. Right in the chat, if you saw on some of my references that went out earlier about the word hoitagogy. Did I say that right, Nigel?
Yes.
Maybe it's a commonplace word for many of you out there. For me, it was new. So I always like to walk away with something new. But if anyone saw that, or that's a new word to them, or that's something that they wouldn't think it to be as valuable an approach. I know in simpler terms, I would always mention engage, educate, and empower. And the self-directed learner is the empowered learner. And that's what I walked away when I looked at this slide that Nigel came, is that's what we really need to be aware of and to try to create without dumping the other 2 areas, the other 2 centric areas, is we need to create those empowered learners. Bringing us to this quote here.
Can I just interrupt and say that Dave DiFilippo made a really good point in saying if you're going to deliver that kind of learning, you need a different kind of leadership. And he's absolutely right. And in some ways, the leadership has to mirror the kind of learning. So that
hey, Dave,
a leader who
fellow Bostonian, I really just have to get it out there. Hi, Dave.
a learner who is prepared to learn, a leader who's prepared to learn, a leader who's prepared to learn from the most junior member of staff. That's the environment where this flourishes. So It's about new kinds of learning, experiential learning, a different kind of approach to content, and certainly a different kind of approach to assessment.
Right.
Because
and I think
you have to do things differently. Go on,
right.
sorry, Sharon.
That echoes into this quote right here. If we do the same things, we will get the same results. We can't keep doing things the same way. We all know, we were just told workforces are now working from home. Another neat quote that kind of goes along with this is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result is by Albert Einstein, that was referred earlier today in the sessions. And that's just crazy. So if we really want to make this self-enabled learner, someone that's going to direct themselves and want to learn in that manner, we have to change things up a bit. The next few slides, I'm just going to jump through and kind of give some visuals of what we mean by self-managed and then really learner managed. So, top-down managed. So before I start that, any last words, Nigel, as I kind of go through these slides?
No, let's go for it.
All right. So just some nice illustrations of what does this really
it's the difference between top-down, which is a very controlled, managed learning experience, through to an experiential learning, which by definition has to be self-managed. You can control the environment, but you can't control the learning experience because it's experiential. And what is more valuable at the moment? I think we're going through a lot of experiential learning. The problem is, in many organizations, they don't know how to bottle that, they don't know how to capture it, and they certainly don't know how to share it. And just so, we're not in a world of facts. I'm not saying that we don't need facts, but I think we are in a world of concepts, of remaking, rethinking, re-engaging, and all of that requires agility and a bit of self-management. And again, with assessment, how do you assess that? You assess it in a completely different way.
So before we even jump the gun on this slide with the LMS and LXP, which we will dive more into, we just want to make sure we're getting the mindset to fully understand where we're at. There's this T-shaped type of people. You have the broad skills and the deep skills. And traditionally, many process-oriented or really based on the design of your organization. Are you a financial institution? Are you a farmer? Are you an ops manufacturer? You really needed employees to have those deep skills to get the job done. What we're trying to illustrate is some of the self-directed learning goes into the broad skills. And in talking about the broad skills, we're looking at what's in it for them, the WIFM, if we go back in time and remember that, it's the development and the depth of their career skills so that they can shift and point and be agile. And in today's situation, specifically in these unprecedented times, you do need that agile career developed person, or you need that culture that will drive it.
So Dave DeFilippo said, what is the notion of T-shaped leader relevant? I think it is. That what the point here is that it's about T-shaped staff. That I think that if you have people who have expertise without curiosity, who are bound by the nature of their expertise and therefore won't share, won't communicate, won't work in multidisciplinary teams, then I think you limit the opportunities in the organization. If you have leaders that have not got that broad-based curiosity, if you've got, for example, leaders who've come through a finance route and they only ever see everything as a dollars and cents problem, then they are not going to understand the complexity of the world they're having to deal with, or the nature
Nigel,
of leadership.
Here's something very cool Barbara brings up, and I hadn't heard of this, but I love it, and I think it may impact our presentation.
M-shaped.
M-shaped. This is fabulous, meaning that as one will have to go deep in different areas, come up and down. I love it. I think if that's already known out there, great. And if not, it's definitely going to be a part of this presentation. I love that M-shaped. Anything else that I'm missing out there, Nigel, as people are kind of chatting about this?
Well, what it means is that you've got to be prepared to get deep skills in more than one area in your career. And you've got to be able to understand broadly why you need to do that. So if you like, the curiosity powers you to explore some area in depth. So I'm not saying that organizations don't need expertise, they do, but they don't want people whose expertise shuts them off from any opportunity to question or to challenge or to be challenged. And that's where a cult of experts or an organization that's just full of experts. In some ways, that was Polaroid. Polaroid was full of the world's most brilliant chemists, but they said an image is a chemical issue. A movie is a chemical issue. Really deep, really clever people, no curiosity, no breadth. So they missed digital entirely.
Right.
And that is the problem. And we're going to have a lot of missed digital things going on in the next year or two.
Nigel, so you bring that up, and very interesting. The traditional old Polaroid offices, massive neighbor work there, completely destroyed. They're not even there anymore. So we're going to ask you guys to jump back on, and please take a moment. We're going to give you more than 10 seconds on this. If you have definitions for all, and can I just put out there that having all these initials is not the language you would speak to the business, please don't. They could care less or even want to know what LXP, LRS, but list to me, and we're going to talk briefly about LMS, LXP, and LRS, because I think the definitions and how we define it really cultivates the culture that we're trying to kind of get to in regards to having a self-directed learner. So we're going to stay a bit quiet here, let you guys get time to catch up on the chat, and please put whatever you can define, and if you don't know, that's great too. Even just put, you got me on LRS or LXP.
And thanks a lot, Barbara, for the book reference as well. The Amazon Artificial Intelligence Education Promises Implications link there. And Lynn, amazing, an old Polaridian. It was a pretty cool company in its day, I have to say.
So I want to see some activity. I'm not seeing it as much. In the Q&A, if you have questions, please pop them in there. We have a couple of people online to make sure we get, and you guys feel as though you're all
right. There's some questions about what does LXP stand for.
We're going to get to that. Don't jump. Don't jump.
All right.
Let's.
Sorry.
You can see I worked a bit with Nigel.
I'm being punished now.
We're going to get there. In the next slide, we're going to get there. Okay, I think we've seen some activity here. Okay, now go for it, Nigel. What does LXP stand for?
It stands for Learning Experience Platform, and it's a term that was coined by Josh Bersin, I think, and he was trying to differentiate between learning management systems, which are essentially databases, and a new kind of product that was trying to focus on the quality of the learning experience for the individual learner. And the LRS is the learning record store. You've got to have some place to work out what people have done, what they might do. You've got to have some machine intelligence in there to be able to not just understand the journey you're on, but point you to the next stage in the journey. So an LXP is really focused on the front end, the learner experience, and LMS tends to, although they're changing now, tended to be focused on the back end, the quality of the data that they could pour out. Right. And a lot of them did not have the world's most sympathetic and encouraging and motivating front ends. They're basically a splurge of information and opportunities. Right. So it would be like if I logged on to Netflix and Netflix gave me 65,000 items all in alphabetical order. That is the kind of, that's an LMS.
And Nigel,
Netflix is kind of like an LXP. Go on.
Yeah, it did happen back in the day, and many vendors did this. They gave everybody, well, first it was a couple hundred courses, and then it went to 5,000. And then the learners were like, too much, I'm doing none of it. In my research that I had done for 6 months in this area, it was best defined to me by a professor at Trinity College, Professor Vinnie Wade, that an LMS was a snapshot of the past. Something that we felt we needed for the compliance to do the check next. Really, the LXP, though, was hopefully going to be a predictor for the future, and also something that could help us build into the business decisions of tomorrow. So really, the LXP was supposed to be pulling us into that seat at the table with the business and helping the decisions being made there. And not to think that you can't do an LXP for real compliance-driven courses, because also you'll see further on, as we're going to go into, that's a system that seems to be broken, yet we keep doing the same thing over and over, expecting it to change. So with that, we even come into this last question here, and I'm going to throw this over to you as well and let you start with this, Nigel.
Start with what?
The question
this
here,
slide.
What is the status of market development for LXP technologies?
They are incredibly well advanced. You know, that there are thousands of companies using LXPs, and basically the principles have been established, and what's happening now is that companies are tweaking them, making them more sensitive, making them more personalized, making them more learner-centric, et cetera, et cetera. But the actual principle is well and truly established. And if you look at why people are choosing or not choosing to invest in LXPs, essentially, if you want motivated learners that can go on their own learning journey, and that requires an attitude to leadership by leadership and management, then you're looking at LXPs. If you want to control it, if you want to define more rigidly what people can do and when they can do it, you're probably looking at LMSs. An LRS is the heart of an LXP, a learning record system.
It's an integrated aggregator.
Integrated, yeah.
Excellent. And I think it's the
engine. The LRS is the engine for an LXP.
So if you go back to like maybe the early 2000s and even think we'd all be like content is king, experience is queen. And we threw those terms around, but we really didn't know what to do with it. Whether or not you like it, your employee base is learning now on their own. They could be looking outside, they could be Googling. They're doing it now because of this unprecedented time, and they're being thrown a lot of resources. So it's either you manage it while it's happening, or it will manage you and your organization. And I think that really brings us to this next slide, which is what does this all look like? And this, we just thought the easiest thing here, rather than to go through the values and benefits, is this is our product stream, much to what Nigel had said, very Netflix looking, very consumerized learning, which is another thing we talk about for many, many years. And part of the benefit here is that this draws us into looking at learning as it's embedded in the daily workflow of an employee. You get nudges, you get little moments where you get a wave of thought, and that can be defined as spaced learning. All of these areas are proven effective through research. We can go through, we'll add that in the resources, but it is proven when you space out things. You don't give someone a 45-minute or 4-hour compliance-driven course. We've done research, we've checked in, nothing gets remembered to the level that it needs to do to avoid the fines and all the other things that you're gonna see on the next slide. Before I jump off of this slide, Nigel, anything you wanna add to this visual?
If you just look at it, you know, it's putting 9 things in front of me. I can cope with 9, I can't cope with 90 or even 40. The idea is to help people follow both what the company wants them to do and also what they want to do for their own personal career development. So it's acknowledging that every single employee is a two-sided beast. On the one hand, that person is an employee and wants to do their job. On the other hand, that person wants to develop themselves and have a decent career. And they want to explore, and they want to look at their curiosity and have their curiosity satiated. So that allows both of those things to happen. And the more the person looks, the more the machine will understand and suggest. So it's a personalized experience. That's the key. It's personalized just for me, not for Sharon, not for Anna, just for me. That's the key. And no LMS does that. An LMS, the front end is the front end for everybody. This is for one person.
And that brings us perfectly into this slide. And we have a few more slides, folks. So if you haven't hit the Q&A yet, I see my colleagues are out there answering some of them. Feel free to dive into that. We will also stick around a little bit further if the questions go along. But I really think, what is driving this? Well, in that bottom section, a couple of years ago, I had done research on really the state of compliance training at that point. And over about 5 years of talking about it at conferences, surprised that the rooms would always fill up. People felt and knew that some of it wasn't working. These are some of the things that folks told us. And that is that really only 26% think that required learning's required and should be there. They all know it's not effective. We've done through the years quite a bit of research noting it's not. People forget most within 21 days. The content isn't relevant. So many times somebody in ops will be asked what they must do as a portfolio manager in order to prevent XYZ happening, or in manufacturing, someone that might be an executive assistant being asked how to bend the metal or do things like that because it was mandated, and they said, hey, you know, it's simple, just give it to everybody, make sure we click that box and we're really holding to the standards. the behavior did not change because it wasn't that personalized. You need to ensure that the user experience is gold, and you need to make sure that employees have the ability to kind of understand what they're getting and they know what to do. Space learning, nudges, things like that. Any other things that I may have forgotten on driving adoption on this? Because you led us really well into it, Nigel.
Well, the important point is that if you have a learning opportunity where people know over half of the content already, the outcome is boredom and frustration and anger. And sometimes, I think sometimes L&D people assume that everyone loves them because they're providing learning, but it can be often the opposite. They can be the ones who keep away from me. I don't want to, because it's boring, because I know it already, because it's irrelevant to me. So the point about an LXP is to lower the cost of delivery, not raise the cost of delivery, enhance the end user experience, increase employee engagement, and help people choose their own what and their own when. That's the essence of it. So it's like kind of a modern platform for a modern learner in a modern organization, to me anyway.
And that's the modern ecosystem that a learning company as we have definitely has that, and you'll see many of that in the resources. This is our wrap-up slide, and then we're going to leave you a group of resources, which I'm pretty excited to show you on that. But which features are potentially most appealing? When this research came out, and I did this 2 years ago, I was shell-shocked. What was shell-shocking about this was the least important areas. I think I'd sat through a million events and conferences saying, we need video, it needs to be mobile, gamification. Those aren't bad things, so don't take this wrong. Doesn't mean get rid of them. But what the learner said was most important, and you can understand why now, and the value of an LXP is having the time invested in learning was relevant to their industry experience, their knowledge, and in some cases, their regulatory understanding, that they weren't new to an industry or that they had to really regroup it all. The importance of learning, impacting behavior versus training, and this is a big mantra for me, you train an animal or you train for sport, but human beings change behavior, and that's the real meaning of learning and the real meaning of an empowered learner. And then, making sure that it's relevant and personalized. I'm not even going to dive into that. Nigel's done an amazing job at explaining that. So before we jump to our resources, which I'll get to, and folks continue to use the chat, I can see it's quite active, and I'm really excited by that. Anything you want to add just on this slide as we kind of jump into our resources?
Yes, just very quickly, that we make the assumption that if we put all the bells and whistles in, if we make it on video, beautiful video, we have a bit of gamification in there, bit of mobile in there, everyone's going to be falling in love with it. The truth is that what people want is something that's relevant. And I don't blame them. That's what I want. And if it's relevant, if it's the right stuff and the right moment, then you don't care whether it's got bells and whistles. Nice to have, but it doesn't matter. The key is time invested is appropriate to who I am, and it's relevant and it's personalized, and it impacts on what I can do as quickly as possible. That's the key stuff. It's a kind of diversion. And anyone who thinks that sticking a bit of video in is going to make something boring, less boring, I just don't think that's true.
Especially if it's the talking head. You bring in an executive and all they're going to do is stare at you and talk. That's not it. And it's definitely not impacting the business deliverables. There's still a ton of fines in many regulated industries. So once again, don't keep doing what you've already done. And that really leaves us to an opportunity now to answer some questions real time here and to highlight those. And I'm going to ask that Anna and Rob, if you're seeing any themes come out that we haven't seen. But before we do that, this is the fun part. If you haven't used a QRC code, and honestly, I just really learned how to use these a year or two ago, you bring your phone up and you simply go on the camera part and you click and you'll see that it's doing that. We're going to leave this up for a bit. So feel free. This is also located at our booth and our resources in the exhibition hall. But before we even go to that, we have about 10 minutes left, if I'm right, to the VFAIR folks and the HCM folks that are managing this. I want to make sure we get some questions going. So Nigel, before we start in, I'm going to reach out to Anna and Rob. Rob first, are you seeing any themes or questions? And just pop in if you can and say yes or no. And if you are, maybe what you can share with us that you've seen while we've been speaking.
Hi there. Yeah, so we've got a good question in from Tara Thulson that's getting quite a bit of feedback. What advice do you have on how to modernise learning in an organisation where technology is a barrier and budgets don't allow for tech development?
I think you start with right at the other end. You don't start with modernizing learning. You start with, what does this organization really need? And Kevin's asked a question saying there's new opportunities here, because when we all get back to work finally, and we will, it will be about renewal, not replacement. Right. So what does this organization need? And you work back from there. And so many tools now are available that are free or of negligible cost. So you don't need to go and spend vast amounts of money on a great big tech infrastructure when Slack will do, or you can do a lot on WhatsApp, or whether you set up communities where people can solve their own problems and share issues amongst themselves. So start from the other end and work backwards, and start as if you had nothing, and that you're building it out from scratch. Right. And that can give you insights.
If we look at the way we've been working the past 4 weeks, not anyone got a big budget to try to survive this, or very few did. I think we discussed that at the very beginning. Rob, can you say the name again? Who was that reached out?
Sorry, it was Tara Thorson.
Okay, Tara, if you want to reach out to me, I believe I'm the only Claffy Calliope at the event. I had no budget for a number of years in a previous organization, and it's really kind of leveraging and going with what the business goal is and what the criteria of success is. And believe it or not, that's a great avenue to learner self-managed learning, and regardless of learning experience platform or not. Also, in reaching out to Learning Pool, they will guide you. Many of our solutions started with open source technology that if you have tech folks, they may be able to figure it out. And once again, very low to none of a budget is even needed. So please feel free to reach out to me directly. I don't want to kind of go through all the details of it, but I've got a list, and also you can feel comfortable. I know many vendors are doing this. Reach out and we'll let you know the open source solutions as well. But it's a great question. Many people don't even tackle this self-managed approach because they think it does need a budget. Rob, what else is out there?
Okay, so a question from Kevin, which I know Nigel's already picked up on, but really, do we have a great opportunity now as businesses start to bring people back into the business after a period of either furlough or working from home? What type of skills and learning opportunity might we be heading towards now, so we could do some planning around?
Right, and I think as an industry, now is the time for us to stand up, whether or not they're at this event, because many will not be if they've been laid off or furloughed or whatever. Get your resources out there. I know there's a bit of bashing going on. Oh, there's so much. If you have a no cost, we have a no cost one-click solution. I believe it's the Ready to Use Corona. It has 8 curriculums there, 8 courses, 1 curriculum. Get it out there. Don't collect people's personal info. Let people have that information. It will go with them. The world will come back to normalcy. Many of these folks that are feeling it now will pop into probably stronger, more resilient. I actually have a neat thing that I'll add, the 18 things that strong people need to have. And of that is, there was one here that said, they're prepared to work and succeed on their own merits. And that's really what's going to get us all through this, because we are doing it, but we're doing it together for once. The whole world is experiencing this. So please put out, if you have resources out there, let's help support. I think this is the timing that's going to make a difference.
Hi, Sharon.
I also think it's time to empower. Let me just say one thing quickly, Anna, then it's over to you. This is the time to empower your people to work out what they need and to work out the best modes for them and how they can make progress. So listen, you've got to listen to the people out there who are hurting and want to do good work and want a bigger opportunity to do good work when they get back. Anna, on you go. Sorry.
Anna.
Okay, we haven't got long, so I'm going to tell you 2 at once. You'll have to try and keep them in your head. So one of them from Linda, who says her company's just purchased an LMS. Are they obsolete from the start? So a bit of reassurance there. And then one from Mary Kay, sorry if I'm not pronouncing that right, asking about LXP systems tracking completion. Do they have good data tracking for completion?
Okay, I probably don't know all the answers on this one, and Anna, we may need you to jump in as well. In regard to Linda, it happens. LMSs need to get purchased. There's a level of confidence, and once again, you're not gonna, they have a thing like you can't break town hall or you can't change it all. You gotta accept that. Many of the LXPs, I know ours, can layer on top of LMSs. That's where the learning record store, the integrators are very, very valuable and very useful. What's neat is play nice in the LMS sandbox, but every now and then use a component of that mandated training and put it in a more experiential design and get the point across, because people will go to it and will love it. In my experience, we've done that. As far as the trackability and LXP, Anna, I'm going to lob that back to you. And then Nigel, I'd love to get your thoughts because I know Anna is really our product person and our tech person. What are your thoughts on that, Anna?
So LXPs tend to be very good at data because they rely on it. Not only do they output data like some of the older SCORM systems, and they're more likely to do it in a modern standard like XAPI, but they need that because of course they're collecting data all the time. That's what powers those recommendation engines. So I would say they're generally better than an LMS.
Yeah,
great.
I
And
think
one thing, Nigel, just before I forget, sorry, in 2 other previous presentations, it's the intelligence around the AI, that machine learning component that really feeds it back and makes that which you're collecting and that learning experience platform that much more richer. I just want to put that out there because it was mentioned in 2 other sessions and someone asked me to mention that. So I apologize, Nigel, go for it. We still have a whole 2 minutes.
All I was going to say was to echo what Anna says. XAPI tracks everything. So that it will, not only can it measure completion, it can have 6 degrees of completion, and it can track every single one of those. So it's the way you set it up. You've got much more flexibility than just having clicked on the, having clicked on the last slide, which is not a brilliant way of really checking whether anyone's learned anything at all. So yes, there are tools that just sit in there and can be very, very surgical in how they can analyze what's going on.
Right. And I want to add to that, you have a very non-technical solution for setting that up. We have a gentleman on our team, James Marshall, I believe, who came up with this working backwards concept, and what I came in with the old book from the 90s, Performance Consulting. If you set up your business goal and your criteria of success, this is all non-technical, and have that design, you'll know what you need of the XAPI details of content, so you're not just pulling in content for the sake of it. You have a real strategy, and you're really connected to what the business goals are and where it's headed. And that too, I believe, will make you that much more successful. Any last words, Nigel? We're going to sign out. However, before we leave, and I want to make sure you all have enough time to get to the next session, we will be on, and maybe Rob, you can share with everyone where we're going to be hanging out to answer more questions. Keep the chat going if you don't mind, guys, with HCM. I know we have a break after this. We will get back to all your questions on the chat, but we will also be in our exhibition booth. Rob, let us know where we're going to be virtually after this.
Yeah, absolutely. If you pop across to the Learning Pool booth and use the live chat on the stand, we've got a few people lined up with lots of different skills to help out.
Great. And I'm going to give Nigel the last word here. I'm going to say goodbye now. Thank you all. Nigel has been a hero to be a part of this. He's done many years of research in regard to it. How do you want to wrap this up, Nigel? And to everyone that's attended, this has been very exciting. I've grown a lot just from preparing for it, and I want to thank you all. And Nigel?
I want to thank everyone who was on this call. There were 83 people, but we've had a huge amount of information coming from you, and it really helps. It helps us shape and focus, and it helps us realize that some of the things, at least that we say, are striking home. So thank you for your participation. I think that's really important. Thank you to the CLO team who got this up and running. They did a really terrific job. And above all,
and to Anna and Rob,
team.
Thank you guys
Anna,
as
Rob,
well.
and to you as well, Sharon. So thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Many thanks,
for the rest of the conference. Bye.
Have a good afternoon.
Bye.
Thank you.